Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Please do like, share and subscribe if you like the following video. It helps out the channel a lot. I want to try and grow it a lot more than it has been. So yeah, please be part of the discussion. Join the ride, as it were. Speaking of rides, so I want to start a new series, and I'm about to start it kind of right now with this video. But it's going to be a series where I look at movie lists and my kind of various issues with each one. Some of them are older movie lists, some of them might be newer ones that pop up. But basically a series where I kind of like take movie lists, specific ones to task. And the first one I want to start with is the IMDb Top 250. A movie list that's been around as long as the site has, I think, which is actually probably maybe close to 30 years now, it feels like. The IMDb has been around, which is the Internet Movie Database, for those of you that don't know. But I'm assuming you're movie fans, right? So unless you're living under a rock, you're aware of the IMDb, and you're probably aware of the IMDb Top 250, which essentially is a top 250 list of the best movies ever made according to the aggregate user votes. Okay, because you can vote a movie from 1 to 10 on that site if you're a registered user. So that's the first list I want to take to task. Now, I'm going to do that in the next video. In this video, I thought we'd have a bit of fun first, right? And I've kind of scoured through that list, which I'm quite familiar with. And I've picked 10 movies that I think have no place belonging on that list or any other best of movie list for that matter. So they're going to be in kind of descending or ascending order if you kind of going from 250 to 1. So I've picked 10 movies. But trust me, I could have picked a lot more. I did a short list and it got to about 40 or 50. So, but we'll settle on 10. And if this movie proves, you like it and entertaining and popular and whatnot, then I can always do a follow-up video as well of another 10. But some of these probably highlight some of the issues that I think are endemic to that top 250 list. Now, I'm not trying to bash IMDb, okay, because that's something that I swore by as a young kind of film fan when I was like 14, 15, in my teens. I used to use that site. I mean, I used to have it as my homepage on my browser, on my computer, back when I was like 14, 15, 16 years old, because I used to swear by it, and I check it every day to see what new movies had entered it, what movies have slid up and down the list. And but then, I quickly grew out of it for various different reasons that I'll probably go into the next video actually. But I think the IMDb is useful if you are a kind of budding film fan, or you're just finding your feet as a film fan, as a kind of primer of certain cinematic signposts of mainly, yes, the kind of most popular mainstream populist classics, as it were. Not even classics, but just the mainstream popular films that people rate highly. And then you can kind of veer off and find your own way from there. So, but nonetheless, let's get into this video of the 10 films that I think just do not belong on this list whatsoever. The first one that I want to talk about briefly will be no surprise to those of you that are regular viewers of this channel, because I've kind of derided this franchise before, and that is Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl from 2003, which pops in at 222 on this list with an average rating of 8.1. I'll take my subjective bias out of it for a second. I just can't see, I'll try and be objective, and I can't see or understand how even a fan of this film can put across the perspective that this is one of the best mainstream blockbuster films ever made. Never mind of just the 21st century, ever made. Because that's kind of the claim you'd have to make of even remotely considering it for a top 250. I don't understand it whatsoever. Like I say, I'm not a fan of the franchise, but I just cannot understand how a film, to me, is really just kind of, it's not really notable. I mean, the film's made a lot of money, but then if you want to go by that criterion, this list would look more different, and even worse than its current iteration, and you get a very, very different list, because the most successful movies do not necessarily mean the most interesting or satisfying movies. It just means the movies that we all went to see doesn't tell us what we think about them necessarily. Avatar, to my knowledge, is not in the top 250 IMDb list. One of the most successful movies ever made. So, neither is Titanic, I don't think. So I might be wrong on that, but I don't think it is. So there's two examples for you. So yeah, I just don't get it whatsoever from Pirates of the Caribbean. So that's my first pick. My second pick, and the next two kind of form of somewhat of a matched pair, I think, actually, in terms of, I think they're probably rated highly by the same kind of movie fan. And I actually made a point of watching this film relatively recently because I saw that it was on this list, and I thought, well, maybe it's a hidden gem because I don't see it talked about too highly in other publications or by critics, or I haven't really seen anyone in person speak about this too highly. Nonetheless, it's rated very highly, so let's see if I'm missing out on something here. And that's Mel Gibson's Hacksaw Ridge, which breaks the top 200 at 190, again with an average rating of 8.1. I thought it was awful. I thought it was terrible. From the opening 2 minutes, which I thought was a kind of laughable, almost satirization of battlefield scenes, war scenes, but actually it's Mel Gibson being deadly serious and sincere. I thought the opening, they were just bloody awful. And the film just kind of gets worse. It's 140-ish minutes long, way too long. So it's an overlong film. It looks terrible. It has a real terrible look and aesthetic. Some of the acting, even by the top players in this, is kind of a bit iffy. The dialogue and the script is not great. Mel Gibson takes what actually would have been a very, very interesting story about the kind of moral, philosophical quandaries of a conscientious objector fighting in the war, who's religious, takes all those interesting elements, those contradictions, an interesting character for a real life person in history, by the way, who was a medic who killed no one, didn't kill anyone in the war, and didn't shoot a single bullet, but saved loads of lives. It takes that story and turns it into a kind of like on the nose religious allegory. I mean, which is hardly unsurprising given it's Mel Gibson, but like I say, it's on the nose, it's contrived, it's overlong. I think the film, like I say, it looks awful. I don't understand how this has got an average rating of 8.1. Kind of like the next film, which is a film I watched, and I think I remember going onto IMDb and then was shocked to see it was in the top 250, and it's still there now. Warrior, the kind of MMA cage fighting film with Tom Hardy, ranked at 176, again with an average rating of 8.1. I want to call this a kind of poor man's Rocky, but I think that's being harsh to Rocky. Again, another film that's overlong, that's just really uninteresting and kind of, I think, dramatically uninspiring. I mean, look, I'm not even like, it's not like I'm wholly uninterested in the milieu of MMA, mixed martial arts, and I think Tom Hardy's an interesting actor. I kind of like Tom Hardy, so it's not even you got an uphill battle with me winning me over with this movie. But at the end of it, I thought, my God, that was just an overlong, self-indulgent, contrived mess. Essentially a story about two brothers who are cage fighters. I think one's retired, isn't he? But there's this tournament with huge prize money at the end of it. They both enter it. You kind of see where the movie's going from then on. But it's about 140 minutes long. Nick Nolte got a lot of plaudits for his performance as the kind of alcoholic, abusive father of the two boys, but it's an okay performance. It's nothing to like kind of write home about. I just don't get it. I don't understand how this film has got an average rating of 8.1. Again, the reason why I say this is a match pair with this and Hacksaw Ridge is I think, impressionable young males probably love these two movies. I don't see why, to be honest with you. Really kind of uninteresting movies. I think Hacksaw Ridge is worse. I think that is actually quite a terrible movie. But anyway, I'll move on to my next pick, which the next two or three actually illustrate a great problem that I have with the IMDb list in general, and that's issues of overrepresentation, particularly in the name Directorial overrepresentation. So the first one I've got here is Catch Me If You Can, Steven Spielberg's film from 2002. It's 174 on this list, 8.1 rating, average again. I just think okay, having 3 or 4 Spielberg movies on here, which indeed there are way more, is fine. But naming Catch Me If You Can is it really even a top 5 Spielberg movie? Top 10 even? And then to have it ranked at 174? I know Catch Me If You Can is popular, but is it that great? One of the best movies ever made, really? I just, like I said, I think it's just, and again, it's this idea of, because Spielberg obviously is a very famous and successful movie director, people are more prone to seeing his movies, and I think if he makes a good movie, it's therefore more just by those odds going to be rated by more people and fairly highly because he's a competent director. And as a result, I think he's way overrepresented. I think this is the issue of films like this and the next film that I'm about to mention, which is, by the way, Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder, which also makes this list at 162, again with an average rating of 8.1. These are movies I think a lot of people would never name in their top 100 favourites, but I think just because of how the list works with aggregation in terms of if loads of people are rating it 8 out of 10 but not a 9 or a 10, that actually means it gets a good shot of being on this list, but no one would ever pick it in their top 100. Dial M for Murder really is, it's not even one of Hitchcock's most interesting movies from the 50s, or best movies from the 50s, let alone his entire oeuvre, and then let alone being one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion. But then again, I have a bit of subjective bias in that sense because I'm not really a huge fan of Hitchcock's kind of chamber piece movies, so this and Rope, for example. I'm in the camp that thinks Rope's a bit of a failure of a film, whereas there are a lot of people that really love Rope. And so that's more of a divisive movie, say, than Dial M for Murder, which is why Rope doesn't make the IMDb top 250, because people feel more strongly about it one way or the other, which goes back to my point about if you just if loads of people give a film an 8 out of 10 but they don't really love it, still means it can pop up on a best list, best films list. So yeah, Dial M for Murder for me, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb a little bit on here. I just don't, it's not thought of really by anyone as one of a top 5 Hitchcock movie, but nonetheless it makes the cut. And this next film is a kind of modern example of, a recent example from a modern director who I think, again, his movies are guilty by overrepresentation. I think his films are over-discussed, and he's kind of overly lauded. And that's Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners. I think Denis Villeneuve's kind of the new Nolan, in which everything he touches is gold. I disagree. I think Prisoners is a film which, I don't hate Prisoners. By the way, it ranks at 155. It's almost inside the top 150 greatest films ever made, 8.2. I think the acting's great, really good in the film. I think the film starts off really promising and intriguing, but I think the film just peters out from there and kind of fizzles out, really. And it's weird to say that about a movie that's about, again, 140 minutes long, but it feels like it just ends. I think Villeneuve has a real problem with endings in his movies in general, probably actually Dune 2, which incidentally is inside the top 100 of this list, unsurprisingly. Probably is his best movie ending that he's done yet, and that's not saying a lot, I think, for him, but he does seem to have a problem with endings in his movies. The film just fizzles out, and I think it has a problem with, so the moral quandaries that the film presents are far more interesting than the actual narrative mystery of the film that has to be resolved by the end. And so you get this kind of conflict of interest where the two things don't really coalesce. And it's a shame because, like I said, I think the film starts off promising, but it gets less interesting as it goes along for me, less involving. And like I say, it just feels like it suddenly ends. So those are 3 examples, I think, of directorial overrepresentation in the list. And I've picked 2 directors I'm fans of, Spielberg and in particular Hitchcock, who I think is one of the all-time great directors, in my opinion. The next film is an interesting example because, as Brits, any Brits that watch this channel, you're going to know this film, most likely. And it's a film that's interesting in the sense, in terms of its history with this list, is it barely used to make the cut. It used to kind of drop in and out of the top 250. But now it's halfway up at 121 with an average rating of 8.2. And that's Guy Ritchie's Snatch from 2000. Really? One of the 120-ish best movies ever made? Snatch? I don't even know what to say about Snatch. It's a movie I've watched loads because I kind of had it on VHS when I was a teenager, and it's just one of those movies that, because it recently came out at that point, people you watched it with your mates or whatever, and it's very quotable. And I think it's proved popular with American audiences, maybe because it's the Brad Pitt connection, because this is ranked higher, for example, than Lock, Stock, Guy Ritchie's first movie, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, and which is in the list as well, which is another one I could have picked. But I went for Snatch because it's ranked a lot higher, and I just think to me, it's one of these films that's guilty of being kind of the wave and cycle of kind of post-Tarantino influenced films that are kind of nowhere near as good as Tarantino's, the works that they're kind of emulating. A key example for me is the scene, the car accident scene, where like all the narrative strands come together. Interestingly, it's actually very similar in that sense, I suppose, to Amores Perros, which came out the same year, which I discussed in a video recently, of kind of forgotten 2000s films. Amores Perros actually makes the top 250 as well, but only just. I'd have Amores Perros above Snatch as a better film, because I think actually the whole, where all the narratives come together around the car accident in Snatch, it's really clunky. And it's interesting to see think about how differently Tarantino would have done that. For example, probably a good indicator of it is the scene in Jackie Brown revolving the bag of money in the changing room with Pam Grier's character. That's way more, that's way better directed than what Guy Ritchie does with the clunkiness of bringing all the narrative strands together with the car accident briefly, and then it kind of moves out again. But yeah, Snatch, don't get it. Don't get the love. Now we're moving into the top. So my final three choices are all in the top 100. And this one, again, you're probably going to think I'm beating on Batman again and comic book movies with this. That's not what I'm trying to do with this pick. I'm just genuinely shocked it's in here. The Dark Knight Rises, it's 71. Again, probably hinting at issues of directorial overrepresentation because it's a Nolan movie. But I thought this movie was hated amongst Nolan fans, Batman fans. Even, it's certainly the most derided of Nolan's trilogy. And yet it still makes the top 100. Still makes the top 100. Average rating of 8.4. Like I said, I've seen the movie once. I thought it was really bloated. It had loads of problems. It's kind of forgettable as well. I think The Dark Knight's a better movie, but that obviously is inside IMDb's top 10, which I think is also ridiculous. But The Dark Knight Rises is 71, really? I just don't understand it. Again, even when I'm trying to be objective and understand, well, I thought this movie was kind of disliked deeply by Batman fans, superhero fans, Nolan fans. They see it as one of his weaker films, and like I say, it still makes the top 100. The last two films are really high up this list, and I have a lot of issues with both, but probably have more with this one. This film, I remember watching this. So I watched this in my RE class at school, and even then, when I watched it, I felt an easy feeling like this film there's something off with it, and I can't verbalize it and tell you why. But I think it's really uncomfortable for the reasons that it's not meant to be. And that's the film Life is Beautiful. Ranked 27 here with an average rating of 8.6. The next film I'm about to mention, I think are guilty of... I think they're a nice pair because they're both films that are absolutely drenched in sentimentality. And it shows how effective that is in getting high ratings, I think, from mainstream audiences. I think Life is Beautiful might be one of the... I think it's one of the... Is it one of the worst films I've ever seen? And you might say, what? How is it one of the worst? And I'm not necessarily meaning in terms of its construction, right? It's a film essentially of two halves, isn't it, right? If you've not seen it, it's essentially about this Roberto Benigni plays him. He's the director of the film, but also he's the lead actor in the film. Plays this guy who's kind of wooing this woman. It's a kind of screwball. No, it's almost like a slapstick comedy romance. The first half set in the 40s, and then World War II breaks out. They have a little boy. Him and his little boy get sent off to a concentration camp. And the rest of the movie is about him convincing his boy that this is all a game, essentially. And it's not real what's happening, all the atrocities that's happening in front of their eyes. It's part of this larger game. And he's trying to protect his boy from the horrors of the war. I think it's one of the most ill-judged movies I've ever seen. I really do. I don't understand how this film was seen as a good film. I just think it's one of the most, appallingly ill-judged movies I've ever seen. And I think it's a bit of a kind of a travesty of a film, really. Nonetheless, it got loads of plaudits and success at the time. It's really highly... People love it. I don't know what they're on, to be completely honest. And that might be a lot of you guys, but I think it's an appalling film. And it just is, and makes Schindler's List feel like a documentary, which is saying something, because Schindler's List is something which manipulates the emotions very well. And I don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I dislike Schindler's List. I think Schindler's List is a remarkably well-made film, a remarkable achievement, but I do have my issues with it. This makes Schindler's List look like a documentary. Okay, I think Life is Beautiful is a bad movie. And the next film, ranked at 11, average rating of 8.8, Forrest Gump. I've never really liked Forrest Gump. I understand it's a film that's obviously adored. I mean, that's almost an average rating of 9 out of 10 by every person that's voted this movie. Is insane to me. I don't think it deserved the Best Picture that year, just amongst those films, never mind being considered one of the 15 greatest movies ever made. I don't get it. I think it's overly sentimental and manipulative. I don't even like the ethos or the thesis of the film. I actually think it's deeply... a lot of people think it's got a kind of progressive message. I think it's deeply conservative and reactionary. It's kind of a remarkable technical achievement, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a great film or an all-time great film. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for that, but I'm not a fan of Forrest Gump whatsoever. I just realised I've got a couple of movies in there with Tom Hanks. Didn't mean to beat on Tom Hanks there. Anyway, those are 10 more films. Like I say, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, comment, subscribe, be part of the discussion, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'll always do another 10 if you want me to, but then I'm going to also talk about the IMDb list in more detail in my next video, so be sure to check that out. And as always, guys, take care, and I'll see you on the next one.